Elsa? Yes, Liebchen. You studied economics? I hold advanced degrees in mathematics and economics as well as accounting. So you're not just a pretty face either. She laughed. Not at all. It keeps me amused and curious. I'm always underestimated. Hugo and I have a great time. Rivals and allies put all their attention on him while ignoring me completely. I become part of the furniture, and when he leaves, they have no idea I'm still there. They say things he normally wouldn't if he were present. How could they not notice you? I have tricks that can make me look so plain and uninteresting that if I came up to you, you wouldn't recognize me. That I would have to see to believe. She leaned over in my direction and grabbed the last little crouton that was in my soup bowl with her fingers. She used her right arm to prevent her blouse from touching her bowl in a way that was suspiciously revealing. The performance was impressive, but not directed at me. I looked over at Malcolm. He was acting strangely. His breath was ragged, and beads of sweat had formed on his forehead. I thought he might even launch himself across the table, but Stanley got to him first and whispered something in his ear. Malcolm's ardor subsided, and in a few seconds he was calm and collected. I would have to ask Stanley what he said. I needed his advice in any event. The man had a skill set that was clearly in a class by itself. Stanley nodded in our direction before turning around and opening another bottle of wine. We had turned down the sloping driveway to the squared roundabout that marked the entrance. I watched the front door open, and a tall woman with jet black hair stepped out wearing a thin, cream-colored dress that seemed to defy the bleakness of the weather. She stood alone at the top of the steps as she waited. She smiled as the car approached, but for a moment I saw a flicker of something else. It might have been that she too anticipated our meeting with a sense of trepidation. I wondered at the reason. She knew Johnny and Raymond, Mr. Dodge's chauffeur, therefore that passing emotion must have been due to meeting either the new nanny or myself. That I could elicit such a feeling was inconceivable, but in that brief moment of vulnerability, my heart went out to her. I saw that she, years older and an adult, was as alone and fearful as I was. As we crunched around the driveway toward the front door, I watched a man in a somber morning suit step out, drape a dark blue shawl about her shoulders, and then step to the side. The car stopped, but Johnny didn't wait for Raymond to open the door. He flung it open himself as the nanny squawked, and he dragged me along in his enthusiasm to be the first to introduce me to his aunt. Johnny bounded up the steps with me in tow and announced, "This is Percy. He's staying with us." The lady smiled and leaned slightly towards me as she held out her hand. Still caught in that precious moment of impossible connection, I stepped in close and hugged her waist. She laughed and said, "Whoa, little man, here we do things a little differently, but I thank you just the same. I'm Alice." I stepped back a little flustered, but as I looked into her dark eyes that sparkled with a pleasure that seemed to focus only on me, "My name is Percy," I said, looking up at her. "Yes, it is. And this is Stanley," she said, turning toward the man in the dark suit next to her. Something passed between them, and then he looked down at me. I stuck out my hand, but he didn't take it. I let it drop to my side. He examined me with bright blue eyes that could have hidden any emotion or none at all. He didn't speak, but only nodded. And so Stanley, a few seconds after Alice, entered my life as I had entered into his. We did look a little worse for wear, but there was a bar not far from the precinct that had probably served customers in worse shape. We went there. I drank whiskey. He drank shots of anisette and white rum. By the time the night had turned to morning, we had both switched to dark rum. The man told me his story in many bits and pieces. I told him mine in the same way, not all at once. We trusted each other in certain things, but not in all. To me, we were like dogs, sniffing each other, trying to determine the other's measure. We weren't friends. That came later. Instead, we were compañeros en la violencia. I know some Spanish, and it is a fitting description of both of us. His was a brutal world, mine the opposite, or so it is betrayed. Often such disparate worlds collide with ugly consequences. Ours instead intersected, and out of that came a friendship that has lasted ever since. His name was Raymond Figueroa, and he had come to New York City from Puerto Rico with nothing but his fighting and his wits.